afternoon. Well, first of all, I would like to start by asking you a little bit on what you do, and in particular, what you do with a software called Korsakov. So what is Korsakov? How does it relate to your own work and career?
The Korsakov system is a software that I invented by accident in 2000, in the year 2000, so like 15 years ago. And it's a software to make nonlinear, interactive, rule-based narration. And actually, I think the most interesting thing about it is that it makes rule-based narration. So that it makes an author create rules how a narration comes together. Interactivity is then a result of that. Is like one of the results.
So, and going back to the ages the software has, and in that period there were quite a lot of experience going on worldwide on this idea of point and click choice and on this idea of exploring. Many years ago we did some work with Kevin Brooks from at those days the MIT Media Lab, and I remember talking with him on this idea of the author controlling the narrative as another approach, another side of what people were then calling interactive film. So this idea that the audience could control the way the narration was flowing. Would you say that Korsakov is another perspective on that? So the author still controls the way the narrative is flowing, but he also gives another impression in terms of authorship of the film.
It's basically the author in Korsakov is very important. It's not that the audience then takes over the authorship. So the author is in full control over the material that he feeds in, and he's in full control over the rules that he sets up, how the elements of Korsakov then come together. But he doesn't define what comes at what time. So he creates the rules. And this puts him in a different seat. I think it's very liberating for the author to not, that he doesn't have to say what the viewer then should think.
Going back to 2000, and the internet was still a non-living creature in those days. When you started developing Korsakov, what was the platform you were considering for it?
Okay, actually the whole thing started earlier. It started in 1996 when I was studying at the University of the Arts, and I was studying human interaction design. So we were in a class where we had a lot of computers. And I learned that I'm not interested in design so much, and I am interested in storytelling. So for me, it was actually I didn't think much. I just used computers to tell stories, to build narrations. And because I didn't know how a story works or how narration is normally done, I did it all wrong. So I used the structure of a computer, and came out with a very simple concept in a way, how you can structure narration, and it still exists. So it went out into the world very slowly, but yeah, people are still dealing with it.
Would you say that the idea of the SNU, of the narrative unit, is something that can be applied nowadays across a large number of media platforms? Because, for instance, we look at a video game where you have these interludes of narration, and then the action starts, you play for a little bit, and then the narration comes again. Would you say that the way you have approached Korsakov and the way the narrative flows is something that is adaptable to many platforms, or you see it as a web-oriented piece of software?
No, I would say it's a philosophical concept, how you want to make sense of the world that is around you. As much as linear film is a philosophical concept. So in linear film you say, okay, there's one thing and then the other and then the other and the other and so on. So that's very much a way how you look at the world. And Korsakov has that approach too. It just works different than film. It says there are relations between things. There is not one fixed path that you go. And this also distinguishes Korsakov from other softwares and other concepts where authors pre-think different paths.
Another thing you do, which is quite different from what you usually see in software developers, is that you then use the software and you actually do films using Korsakov. It was something that happened from the beginning, so you developed the software considering to do your own films, or was it something that happened later on by accident and you just wanted to do demos of how to use the software so that you could show the software potential to other people?
It was basically that I made a non-linear interactive film on the topic of alcohol that was called the Korsakov syndrome. And because I couldn't find any software out there that could help me do that, I developed a tool. And basically just because I was lazy. So I wanted to not build a structure where you have to pre-think all the links, because that makes you crazy. It's a lot of work. So I wrote a simple software that keeps track on the links. Mm-hmm. And then I presented that work at the University of the Arts. It was my diploma work, and one of my professors really liked the project. And by the way, he was drunk. Anyway, he said, because it was a film on alcohol, and like the professors were also like got a little bit of alcohol. He got alcohol. Later on we started to teach, and at that time it was called interactive narration. We started a new class, and it was his idea that students should then use the tool that I built for making my film, for making their films. So we basically stripped down a lot of functionality, made it simpler and accessible to other people. And that was the beginning of the software. So in a way, I never really intended to make a software. I just wanted to make my film.
Okay. And going back to the way things are done today, and what's happening nowadays in the industry and in the world of film production as a whole, where do you see Korsakov in this realm of multimedia distribution, where you have so many platforms competing for space and for room to exist, and where you have so many possibilities in terms of narration, but at the same time you still continue to sense the same problems that you had in 2000? The question would be, do you think that things have changed that much? Because in 2000 we were still talking of analog cinema. Nowadays everyone talks of digital cinema. We don't have any analog cameras anymore. We don't shoot on film. We don't distribute on film. Do you think that things have changed that much, or there is still a need for pieces of software that can help in improving the way we can creatively develop new concepts?
I think that conceptually storytelling went backwards. It was much more exciting in 10 years ago, 15 years ago than it is nowadays. So I don't know why that is. Maybe because it's too simple to make beautiful work, but I think this, how should I call that? Like this being focused on linear stories, like I feel that's so strong at the moment. This is very boring. Like we live in a very boring time when it comes to inventing new things. And I think in that sense, Korsakov is for basic research, for basic narrative research, to find new principles of how we narrate the world.
So going back to this idea that you've just expressed of the software as a tool for the expression, so the software, not only Korsakov, but different types of tools as a tool for people to use, namely in academic realms, to express themselves and to develop new ideas or new approaches to a specific problem. Would you say that along your career that was something, because you've always been involved with the academia in a certain sense, do you think that it's something that you see when you when you move around the academia, or do you think that while storytelling has become more bored, do you think that the academia has also become less of an exciting place in terms of multimedia development and film-related areas?
Okay, I know too little about academia because I'm not an academic person. But where the findings are made, I think that's in academia. I don't think that it's done in production.
In the industry.
In the industry, because the industry basically wants to sell stuff, and they think, okay,
it needs its revenue.
Yeah, I mean, what concepts were successful in the past, and we use that concept to do things in the future. And because of the massive force that industry has, it becomes true. Not because it's necessarily the best way of communicating or of telling things or thinking about the world. It's because okay, if Hollywood industry decides this way, or if Sony or whatever decides this way, then it will go that way. And I'm afraid of that, really. But I mean, I think that this way how Korsakov works, not necessarily Korsakov, but this way of rule-based narration, this is so fundamentally and so groundbreaking that it will be in the future, it will be the dominant way of telling things.
Paradigm.
But I don't know when this future will be. And 10 years ago I said it will be in 5 years, so I was obviously wrong. And now I would say it's maybe in 50 years and maybe in 500 years, I don't know. But like, and now basically like we are running the wrong path, like this path of telling like the cool story, the great story, the engaging story that hooks everyone up, that's doomed to fail. I mean, this is not interesting to understand the world.
Going in a completely different direction. The way you've just described how you started developing Korsakov at school, how it came out of your regular education, so to say, is typically the story of an entrepreneur, and that's something that we are quite interested on. So to understand what is to be an entrepreneur in the so-called creative industry. So what is to be an entrepreneur in this area of film and all the areas related with arts. In your opinion, what are the core challenges you faced along these years of developing and disseminating this software?
I don't know. I mean, basically, like, things always came to me. Matt Soar gave me a call, Professor Matt Soar in Canada, who is extremely important in this whole development. He called me in 2007, I believe, and asked me how am I doing, and he organized funding for further development of Korsakov. A couple of years ago, I tried to become a business person and sell Korsakov, and I did extremely bad in that. So I might be like a very talented Korsakov thinker or developer or whatever, but I'm not a business person. So I like we are now we have now a problem, because either we make it a product, or we survive in the world of business in a way, so we can sell the software, we have an audience out there that buys it and gives us money, or we will fail in the future. So the problem that I'm facing is that I have another job that I spend a lot of time and a lot of energy in, and I develop Korsakov at the side of it. This is not effective. I mean, I'm this other job that I have, I think a lot of people are really good at that, and I'm just like average. But in Korsakov, I'm really good at that, to think about that. So in an ideal world, I should be in a situation where I could focus on that. And I tried to build that up and set that up with a business model. But that kind of failed. I was also not that ambitious, because I'm in a way not interested in money. That's the problem, I guess.
Would you say that to be an entrepreneur when dealing with artistic content or artistic approaches, it's something that in the end will always kind of hit against that wall of revenue versus continuing to develop the creative side of your project, or you don't think that's an issue? That's something that kind of sorts along the way?
When you develop stuff and when you have ideas, very often you develop stuff out of your gut feeling. So you have an idea, and then you don't really know why you are doing that, or you made a mistake, and then you come to something that's really cool. Like when I remember the times in the beginning of Korsakov, the first 8 years, like how many people approached me and told me like why this concept is bullshit, is doomed to fail, and not because of that it failed, but because it was bullshit in the old terms, it worked. So if you have like a brilliant idea, you will for sure not be able to sell it, because you can just, at the moment, I don't know, you can just sell ideas that are that are based on old ideas. If you have a new idea, no one will recognize that as an idea. At least that's my feeling with it. And I think that unfortunately in the new media business, or in internet startup companies or so, really stupid concepts were really successful. not just really stupid concepts, but pretty stupid concepts. And that dumped down the whole imagination of developers.
Kind of the threshold kind of came down in terms of the quality of the new businesses.
Yeah, it's sad, isn't it?
Yeah, it's something that when you look at the way, for instance, the game industry has been developing itself in the last couple of years, it's terrific because some of the concepts are extremely bad. Still in relation with that, one of the things that has been discussed a lot in this idea of interactive cinema or of bringing film to the domain of interactivity, one of the things that has been discussed a lot is this idea of database cinema. So this idea that you can have repositories of content, and the web would be a real knockout in that area, where you could have repositories of content that authors could steal from and create, reorganize new narratives and develop new concepts. Do you think that is something that is feasible? This idea that Manovich had of this database cinema where you could re-edit new stories out of existing material?
No.
Okay.
And
why?
The reason, because we played around with it, we tried it. And I think if you have a linear narration, that's excellent. Like this is a lot of brilliant people thought about it, why it has to be linear, and it's made for that. It's like in a way the perfect work. You cannot make it better by mixing it up with a lot of other stuff. But I think you should not start like that. You should not try to make linear pieces. You can have as an outcome a linear piece as well, but you should start non-linearly.
Mm-hmm.
But I might be wrong with that. Might be that Lev is right.
And do you think that this idea of non-linearity, which is extremely old and that it's something that has been explored quite a lot along film history, is something that the internet and the potential of specific tools like Korsakov push a little bit forward? Or do you think that they just explore old concepts in a new technological realm, or they push the concept forward?
The internet definitely pushes the concept forward, because basically things that happen in Korsakov happen in the internet by accident. So when I look at YouTube, for example, like when YouTube came up, I was really excited about it, because it was actually a couple of years after I started to work with Korsakov, because it starts on a similar concept that you have keywords and video clips. And when I look at YouTube, I see a Korsakov film, a very, very, very messy Korsakov film, but nevertheless a Korsakov film. And I see the strengths that it has. And there are so many people interested in watching YouTube clips and going through that environment. That's so cool. I mean, for sure, for sooner or later, something like Korsakov or Korsakov will happen and will be used in media production, in news, or in, I don't know, I mean, like the perfect example would be anthropological film. Mm-hmm. Like I have no clue why you would make a linear film about a subject and not make a Korsakov film. It's problematic. It's highly problematic.
One of the buzzwords of those days in multimedia production was this idea of interactive. Stuff is interactive. So, and you had all this, I would say, commercial show around this idea of everything was interactive. Everything had some sort of interactivity. And at the same time, film stayed as kind of a pompous reduce where interactivity had no room. So you would say that, okay, film is so good at doing stuff in linear form, why would we do it differently? Why do we need? And you've always seen this kind of distance between people doing traditional, so to call, film, and those using film for another things, using film for another type of development, for another type of whatever. Do you think that nowadays, with all the development we've seen and with all the changes in the distribution platforms that definitely have a role in this domain, do you think that it's still something so far away, this idea of film production and film development and the idea of developing interactive products?
I'm personally not interested in interactivity. It's exciting. It's an exciting field, but it's not my field. I watch it as I watch like a satellite landing on a comet or so. I'm very much interested. Nevertheless, Korsakov uses interactivity, but I think it doesn't use interactivity. It's not the primal goal.
Yep.
And what I like about it is this rule-basedness, or that an author creates rules, how things then come together, because then you can put things together and you don't know the outcome, so you can learn from it yourself. And I think this is this excites me a lot.
And rules, the first time I looked at Korsakov and that I understood the importance rules have on the software, I understood it as kind of a gamification process of film production, because games is all about rules. When you started developing the software, and when you then later on developed the concept, was that on your mind, this idea of bringing together the world of games, namely the rules side of game development, with the world of film development?
Not my idea really, but like but the idea was certainly there, and you can see it in some things in Korsakov. For example, when you have finished viewing a Korsakov film, it says "play again," and that was because at that time we thought maybe it's a game, but it's not a game. And I always felt really bad when Korsakov was compared to games in terms of interactivity, because I thought, like, okay, you click a button and then another button, that's not really interactive and not really cool, like, you know, if you can be in a 3D environment and do whatever you want. So it took me a long time to understand that it's not about interactivity, and that this is not the strength of Korsakov.
What did you say is the strength of Korsakov?
This thing that the author creates and takes a step back and not pre-thinks all the outcomes. So it's like you are the author of a film, and then it's like this film, and this film is always the same whenever you screen it. And a Korsakov author would more be like an inventor of a game, like a soccer game. So he invents all the rules of a soccer game,
and then things happen.
The field, he puts in all the football players, he puts in a ball and a referee, and
let the game begin.
And every time people watch a soccer game, they see a soccer game. It's always different, but it's always a soccer game.
Okay, one final question. 15 years have passed since you've created Korsakov. Loads of things have definitely changed, not only in the industry, but also in the arts field as a whole in Europe. And clearly things are quite different nowadays, also in educational terms. Art and film schools have evolved a lot, at least namely in the last decade, where training methods and so forth have clearly changed. What would you say is the core strength that Korsakov has as an educational tool? Do you think it's relevant as an educational tool, or do you think it should not be used?
No, I think it's absolutely relevant as an educational tool.
Namely for film schools, for film education.
I think it's also like for journalists and film schools, filmmakers, people that deal with media, even if they in the end not make Korsakov films. Why is it important? Because basically Korsakov shows you multiple realities. So you know that you can look at something from this angle and that angle. And journalists, I work in a newsroom of a television station. There are excellent journalists, and they all went through journalist schools, really hard to get in there. And they all have heard about like that you can write an article, and if you write it like that, you see a thing from that side or from that side. They know it in theory, but they have not experienced it. And this is the experience that you have when you're working with Korsakov, that things are not, like you cannot look at one thing from one side. Korsakov always shows you other sides. And this is so amazing. This is something that is so important for pretty much for everyone to learn that there is not one truth out there.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's great. Okay.